All right, let's get energized and dive into the world of mitochondria.
Yeah, those tiny powerhouses.
Tiny but mighty, right?
Yeah,
They're way more interesting than they might seem at first.
definitely. Most people just remember that powerhouse of the cell
Sure.
nickname.
But there's so much more than that.
Right, key players in all kinds of cellular processes.
So we're going to break it all down for our NEET listeners, all the need-to-know facts,
Structure, functions, even some of those quirky characteristics.
the kind that pop up on exams.
Exactly.
So let's start with that nickname, the powerhouse.
It's not just a catchy phrase, it actually points to their main function.
They're the energy factories fueling our cells.
Exactly.
But how do we make all that energy?
It's not tiny coal-fired power plants in there or anything.
Right, I was picturing something a bit more high-tech.
Well, it is pretty high-tech. It's a process called oxidative phosphorylation.
Okay, that sounds complicated.
It's a series of reactions, but think of it like an assembly line.
Okay, I can picture that.
Electrons get passed down a chain of molecules, and this movement ends up generating ATP.
That's the energy currency of the cells, right?
Exactly.
Like the cash that keeps everything running.
Yeah, perfect analogy.
So where does all this happen? I'm imagining like a tiny bean-shaped thing.
You're on the right track. They have this unique double membrane structure.
Double membrane, so like a...
It's like a room within a room.
Okay, with an outer membrane and then an inner one.
Yeah, the outer one acts like a protective barrier, and then you've got this highly folded inner membrane.
Wait, folded? Why all the wrinkles?
Those folds are crucial. They're called cristae, and they increase the surface area.
More surface area, so more space for...
Exactly. More space for those reactions of oxidative phosphorylation.
More space, more efficiency.
You got it. It means more energy production.
So it's like having a bigger factory to pump out ATP.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
What about inside that inner membrane? What's in there?
That's called the matrix, a dense gel-like substance.
That's the control center.
Yeah, think of it like that, where all the essential enzymes and molecules hang out.
So we got the outer membrane, the folded inner membrane with cristae, and the matrix inside.
Yep, that's our little energy-producing city.
Pretty amazing, but it's not all they do, right?
Oh no, mitochondria are busy little organelles.
I knew it. They have side hustles.
Well, they play a big role in apoptosis.
Apoptosis, that's...
Programmed cell death.
Oh, right, like a self-destruct button.
Exactly, for when cells get damaged or stop working properly.
To keep things running smoothly.
Yeah, essential for healthy tissues.
So they're energy factories and demolition crews.
Plus, they regulate calcium levels.
Wow, multitasking organelles.
And that's important for different signaling pathways, all sorts of things going on.
They're vital, that's clear.
Absolutely.
But is there anything else neat students should know about them? Anything special?
Oh yeah, this is where it gets interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
They have their own DNA, completely separate from the DNA in the nucleus.
Hold on, their own DNA. Like a mini-me inside the cell.
It's true. It's called mitochondrial DNA. mtDNA for short.
mtDNA.
Okay.
Gotta remember that.
And get this, it's circular, not linear like the DNA in the nucleus.
Wow. And what does it do?
Well, it actually codes for some of the proteins the mitochondria need.
So they're not completely reliant on the nucleus.
Nope, pretty independent for an organelle.
That's wild.
That's why they're often described as semi-autonomous. They can replicate themselves, even make some of their own proteins.
Semi-autonomous powerhouses with their own DNA. It's like a cell within a cell.
Exactly. And this has some pretty important implications.
For things like...
Inheritance patterns, disease susceptibility, all sorts of things.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. I'm starting to see why understanding mitochondria is so important.
Not just for NEET, but for understanding life itself.
Absolutely. And speaking of NEET...
There's another fascinating fact about mitochondria that you should definitely know.
Oh, tell me.
You remember those folds in the inner membrane, the cristae? They're covered in these tiny structures called oxysomes.
Oxysomes, what are those? Like mini power stations.
Pretty much. That's where oxidative phosphorylation actually happens, where all that ATP is made.
So it's like the cristae provide the space and the oxysomes are the energy generators.
Exactly. And they're packed with this crucial enzyme called ATP synthase.
ATP synthase, another one for the NEAT nodes.
Definitely. It uses the energy from a proton gradient to synthesize ATP.
Okay, hold up. Proton gradient, is that like a slope where protons roll down and create energy?
That's a great way to think about it. It's a difference in proton concentration across the inner membrane.
So like building up potential energy.
Exactly. And ATP synthase harnesses that energy to make ATP.
It's amazing how efficient these tiny systems are.
It really is.
So back to mtDNA for a second. You mentioned something about inheritance patterns. Is that important for NEAT?
Absolutely. One of the key things to remember is that mtDNA is inherited maternally.
Maternally, so only from the mother.
Exactly. Unlike nuclear DNA, which comes from both parents.
Why is that?
It's thought to be because the egg cell contributes most of the cytoplasm to the embryo, including the mitochondria.
On the sperm cell.
The sperm cell's mitochondria mostly get degraded.
So if there's a mutation in the mother's mtDNA, all her children will inherit it.
That's right, and that can lead to some serious health issues.
Mitochondrial diseases.
Yeah, they can be pretty devastating, and we're still learning a lot about them.
So understanding mtDNA and its inheritance pattern is really important for NEET and for medicine in general.
Absolutely. And remember how we talked about its circular shape?
Yeah, it seemed a bit unusual.
Well, it's thought to be a relic of mtDNA's bacterial origins.
Wait, bacterial origins, like mitochondria used to be bacteria.
That's the leading theory. It's called the endosymbiotic theory.
So ancient eukaryotic cells just engulfed these bacteria,
That's the idea, and they eventually evolved into the mitochondria we know today.
forming a symbiotic relationship. The bacteria provide energy, the cell provides protection.
Exactly. And there's lots of evidence to support this. The circular DNA, their own ribosomes.
Ribosomes, those are like the protein factories, right?
Yeah, and the fact that they have their own really highlights that semi-autonomous nature.
Okay, so mtDNA is inherited maternally, it's circular, and it has bacterial origins.
3 key facts to remember.
That's a lot to take in, but it's fascinating.
It is, and there's even more to explore, like how mtDNA is really susceptible to mutations.
Because it's right next to the oxidative phosphorylation, where all those reactive oxygen species are made,
You got it, those free radicals.
which can damage DNA.
Exactly. And that's thought to play a role in aging and all sorts of age-related diseases.
Some mitochondria are linked to aging too. That's incredible.
It really highlights how important it is to understand these organelles for cell function and for health and disease.
It's wild to think something so small can have such a big impact on our health and how long we live.
Absolutely.
It really shows you just how connected everything is in our bodies.
It really does.
Speaking of being connected, we haven't talked about how mitochondria are arranged in the cell.
Yeah, good point.
They're not just floating around randomly, are they?
No, not all.
I remember reading they can actually move. That's unusual for an organelle, right?
It is. They're actually pretty dynamic.
So how do they move?
They move along the cytoskeleton,
The cytoskeleton, that's like...
the cell's internal scaffolding.
Right, so they use that to get to where they're needed most.
Exactly, to areas where energy demands are high.
Like little energy delivery trucks.
Yeah, a perfect way to put it.
So where are they usually found?
Well, it depends on the cell type, but for example, in muscle cells,
Yeah.
they're often clustered near the contractile fibers.
Makes sense, that's where all the action is happening.
Exactly, they need a constant supply of ATP for muscle contraction.
So it's like having a power station right where it's needed. Talk about efficiency.
It's incredible, and this ability to move also lets them interact with other organelles.
So they're really part of this complex cellular network.
Absolutely, they're not just isolated powerhouses.
Now, before we wrap up, one last thing I wanted to touch on. We talked about how mitochondria have their own DNA and ribosomes, but can they make all their own proteins?
That's a good question, and the answer is not quite.
Ah, so there's more to the story.
Yeah, they can produce some, but most of their proteins are actually encoded by genes in the cell's nucleus.
So it's a joint effort.
Exactly. Those nuclear encoded proteins are made in the cytoplasm and then imported into the mitochondria.
So there's this constant communication between the nucleus, the cytoplasm, and the mitochondria.
It's essential for everything to run smoothly.
This has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of these little powerhouses.
Me too. It's amazing what goes on at the microscopic level.
Absolutely. So for you NEET aspirants out there, remember those key facts. Structure, functions, that unique DNA, and their semi-autonomous nature.
It's all fair game for the exam.
And remember, there's always more to learn.
Oh yeah, the world of mitochondria is vast.
That's it. Keep those NEET prep books handy and keep exploring.
You never know, you might find yourself down a mitochondrial rabbit hole.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of mitochondria.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
Until next time, keep learning and keep exploring.